Well, we have to start with a question because that's truly the foundation of what we do, our message. Question: do you truly believe, or does anyone at all genuinely believe, that the Chinese people are actually going to come to the continent to help us pay the external debt to the International Monetary Fund? Or are the Chinese going to come to replace them? Those who currently have us under their control and with whom we won't be able to reach any kind of agreement. The Chinese are not coming here to negotiate with us. The Chinese are coming because the wealth of the continent attracts them, and they know that here they have untouched land to take everything they need. And if you imagine that they're coming to invest in order to develop some kind of social project in our communities, you're dreaming. So we have to assess these realities ourselves. And let me tell you something. My opinion, or the opinion of many people like me, with the intellectual capacity and knowledge of geopolitics and everything else, is the same as everyone else's, because we listen to journalists, to those who report the news, and more or less they all say the same thing. So there isn't a big difference where you could say there's a cultural level that treats this topic better than that one. Here we have a problem. The United States has sponsored our continent since our independence and has treated us the same way the Spanish did. It was a semi-colony. That's what it was. They gave us independence, but always. As I recall, for example, the major companies were British. The big companies that controlled our country's entire economy were British, or later American. So if there's any chance that we can come to an understanding now, it's better to talk with the British or the Americans than with the Chinese. What do you think of this point of view that I'm trying to propose to you? Now, it's possible that you might not agree, and that's great if we can put it into context for both of us. But of course, in order for us to be able to use that tool, which is artificial intelligence, we have to provide it with elements, we have to give it material, because artificial intelligence is not going to replace the decisions of 1.6 billion inhabitants. In other words, those 1.6 billion inhabitants, it won't be something global, but rather each country will have to independently achieve the greatest possible unity in reaching a consensus of awareness, which will base the certainty and security of public administration on an infallible instrument, a tool that is still in full development and, from everything we see and hear, promises to be 1,000% superior to the human mind. So if we don't give artificial intelligence the tool that can truly bring about change, in other words, what we would call a miracle, then we won't solve anything either. That is, the responsibility always starts with us. Do we want to change? Yes, we want to change. Well, then let's provide tools to the instrument that is making change possible for us. Now then, we also can't be naive enough to believe that the proposal we're making is easy to carry out, or that it will happen without significant effort. We must recognize that putting this idea into practice will require careful consideration and determination. That is, nationalizing the debt, which could be done in 1,000 ways, always with the help of artificial intelligence that defends the interests of both parties. It shouldn't defend the interests of the global financial corporate power and abandon us and help them instead. We have to achieve something very concrete, and so it's extremely important to know that from the start. But at the same time, we can't be naive enough to think that they're going to accept any proposal we make if they're going to lose out. But the problem, as I was saying, is why China is useful to us. It's very important. Perhaps the only thing that could be achieved, because this has to be approved by Congress and so on, meaning it's not a decision, even though it could be a unilateral decision by the president, in this case Trump right now. Well, it's not so easy to achieve because the negotiation would take time. Possibly what might be agreed upon is a moratorium. A moratorium is like the wartime moratoriums, where maybe the debt gets paid, maybe it doesn't, or it gets exchanged for future options that come up. But the important thing is to make it clear in reality that this cannot go on. In other words, the foreign debt cannot continue to be paid off at the cost of hunger and suffering. The disaster that is happening in Latin America, that is important as well. And also, on the other hand, it's important to point out that we don't rely on the help of artificial intelligence because it's a tool, a resource that goes beyond what we ourselves can assess. And our own assessment can be biased, meaning it might only look out for our own interest. And the skill we have in asking questions should always be based on the fundamental condition that there is a balance between the interests of both sides. In other words, the holders of the debt, regardless of the reasons why it was incurred over the past 70 or 80 years, we're not going to start questioning the entire past now. Because if we did, we would never reach any agreement. What we need to do is focus on our current reality. Countries are suffocating, China's advance is unstoppable, and if international financial power goes to war with China, it will cost them more than just taking responsibility for the debt. The debt, if all the labor force and intelligence of Latin America is mobilized along with the potential of its wealth, will pay itself off. In other words, the foreign debt is more of a political issue than anything else, but it has often been used as a pretext to illegitimately take possession of things that did not belong to them. No one is going to question the past, because if we started questioning the past, we would have no capacity to negotiate. Artificial intelligence, we've asked it. I've personally asked it myself. In any case, I spend hours talking with artificial intelligence to learn about what can be done, what could be done differently, or what can't be done due to specific circumstances. All this help we're receiving, I really do spend hours. I spend hours because I say we have to find some way out. And yes, one's ideas may be original or interesting, but you have to see if it's possible to make them happen. So by consulting with someone above you and evaluating all the options, well, we see it becomes clear. I'm seeing it. For example, today, the guidance from artificial intelligence told me to focus on 5 specific points. In other words, it highlights the key points so that this message we're sharing now can be understood and interpreted. In fact, I've made more progress. I'm going to do this same thing not just in Spanish but in English as well, meaning I'm going to make all these videos. And the latest developments related to the same topic, I'm going to present them in English. So, because it's necessary to do it. We're operating in a field that's not about personal gain or getting likes or seeking benefits, but rather about something we genuinely want to solve. And the opportunity now is unlike anything we've ever had before because of the unstoppable presence, as I mentioned before, of China. And that makes it possible for these people to pay attention to us. If we manage to bring this to the negotiating table with our prior organization, as I said before, we're on the right track. So please, if you can help me with this, spread the word however you can. And if you have any ideas, suggest them to me. We'll analyze them and present them publicly. And if we switch to English now, we'll have a much broader field to explain the problems that we really have to solve, no matter what. But anyway, we've developed another stage in our search. We are committed to seeking solutions, to finding paths, to looking for alternatives, to at least sowing something positive. We're not wasting time on pointless arguments, petty squabbles, or village disputes. We are fully dedicated to the search for solutions, which are the great needs that we suffer from. In other words, a continent, a submerged subcontinent of 1.6 billion people, most of them living in poverty, in social marginalization, lacking housing, jobs, the ability to study, social security, healthcare, education, in short, well-being. This is concerning for anyone who considers themselves human. who wants to be of use. In other words, our search is aimed in that direction. So we search and we make proposals. If others join us in what we're doing, they're more than welcome. And if we make mistakes along the way, that's only natural. Anyone who builds makes mistakes. Surely the one who is going to criticize me isn't doing anything at all and is just watching. And of course, for him, it's easy to say no, but this one wants things or is searching for things. Anyway, if we can work honestly and dedicate ourselves to fighting endemic evils, corruption, crime, drug trafficking, all those things that you all know all too well, I believe we're doing something useful, and I think that makes the sacrifice worthwhile. So you are invited. I consider you my partner in this task, in this journey. And thank you. And so we'll see each other at any moment. Maybe you'll even see me speaking English in a few days.